Okay, so we're all hanging out in the pre-existence, and some of us are very old, right? And some of us are not so old, and we're all doing what we do. We obviously have free will because Satan and his followers rebelled, but we come to a point where our progression, at least the progression of some, has been halted. That we're still this spiritual being, and our heavenly parents are obviously these resurrected physical beings. So a grand council is called, where the great ones sit at the table. And some of you, does anybody have in their patriarchal blessing that they were one of the great ones in the council? There's one, two.
Awesome.
Cool. Mine says something about a fence that I was sitting on. So the great ones were there, and then two plans are presented. And first of all, Jesus, our eldest brother, the firstborn of the Spirit. You know, I was thinking, we have eternal families, right? So I have kids right now. So like, does Jesus really have this half older brother named Chuck, who was born to God when he was on his planet? Like when we say families are forever, we think about our kids, right? So was Jesus born on another planet, or is there this other half demigod? So anyway, so Jesus the firstborn says, I will have this plan, and all the glory be mine. Now you pointed something out about this. Not mine. All the glory be thine, my Father. Zilpha told me something interesting I never thought of.
I can't remember it.
The thought is, we worship Jesus all the time, right?
Oh, right. And so, like in the temple, when Satan says, "I'm doing that which has been done in other worlds," so he already knew what had been done in other worlds. So probably Jesus did too. So him saying, "Oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll be the savior, and all the glory can be thine." Because I know what's really going to happen. I'm going to get the glory.
Anyway, we'll put that blasphemy aside.
Yeah, that's total blasphemy. I apologize.
So Satan comes up with another plan, and he says everyone will be saved, right? And then the glory will be mine, Lucifer. Right?
It's such a nice name.
Am I getting the story wrong? Is that right?
Yeah,
it sounds about right.
This is what the war in heaven is fought over.
So basically, Satan was going to force everybody to, however, live righteously or whatever, so that everybody would be able to go back to Heavenly Father. Jesus, there would be a lot of people lost.
Now,
maybe some of us sitting in this room, but...
We'll point out some of the conundrums of this in just a minute here, but there are a lot of general authorities and apologists who say this was a lie. You can't trust Satan's plan because Satan was a liar. Throws sort of a theological conundrum in there. Why are we studying it anyway if it's not true? But so Satan wants to deceive and wants to have this world go down. Now, I have a problem. Zilpha mentioned that when the devil's caught being naughty in the Garden of Eden by giving the fruit of knowledge of good and evil to Adam and Eve, God says, "What is that thou art doing?" Or whatever he says. My High Middle English is kind of rusty. Well, what is that you're doing? And Satan says, "I'm doing that which has been done in other worlds." And God says, "What is that?" "I'm giving the fruit of the knowledge of tree of good and evil to them." And then God says, "Well, because of that, you'll be cursed. And I'll put enmity between you and the people, and you'll fight." And Satan says, "Well, with that enmity, I'll buy up armies, and we'll fight. And we'll have a bloodbath of a world." So if I was the devil, here's what I would say. "If thou cursest me for doing that which has been in other worlds, I'll take those that follow me, and we're going to go over there in that corner of the universe, and we're going to play pinochle for the next 7,000 years. And your whole plan is going to go to shit because no one can choose good nor evil unless they're enticed one way." It says that in the Book of Mormon. And we're not going to entice a single soul. We're going to sit there and we're just going to watch the whole thing spin to a whole stop. There you go, God.
Then it would
have fun
basically
with your plan.
Satan's plan again, right?
But they would tell me that I have been deceived by Satan right now. So that logic that I just used there is, of course, the trick of the devil.
The intellectualism, definitely the trick of the devil.
Convincing me that the devil's trick was not really the devil's trick, so it's all foggy.
You think too much.
So if Satan would have got his way, we'd have had his plan. We would know God. He would be evident. We'd have to believe because he'd show up and, heal the amputees and all the stuff that people say, if there's a God, why doesn't he do all this? So if Satan's plan came through, it would make sense. Religion wouldn't be so confusing. We'd all just believe and follow along. It would be fabulous. But we wouldn't have a choice.
To your point, if Satan's plan were real, it would look something like this. We would take our children and we'd show them pictures of God right away and put them on the wall, right? And we'd say, this is the person that you should be following. This person knows everything. This is God. Whatever he says, be obedient to him. We would have songs, follow the God, follow the... Like we would train them not to choose. We would train them to be perfectly obedient,
That
even
sounds
when
like the
things don't
church.
make sense.
Yeah,
That would be
like the
Satan's
LDS
plan,
church.
right? You have a
Like the
comment.
LDS Church.
What? But you know, there's a lot of great talks and writings about Satan's plan that came out in the Cold War, because they would compare it all to like Soviet Russia. So if you want to have some good reading as a homework assignment, go read through like the Skousen and the Benson and stuff from that era, because the 5-year plans were definitely part of something that Satan cooked up. I'm not saying they were good economic policy, but I don't know if they're devilish. Was there another? All right. So
Okay,
let's,
so the point of the war in heaven actually is that everybody who's born chose to follow Jesus' plan, and all of Satan and all of his minions chose to follow Satan, and he was cast out. All of them were cast out of heaven. And where did God send them? To earth, so that they could tempt us, which they do. And we figured out there were
I left it off at 66 billion of us, right? And then there was 33 billion. So that's, since there's 7 billion of us on the earth today, that's about 5 to 1. Except they're doubling up on the Mormons, right?
Or at least.
Because there's only however many Mormons there are.
Not very
14 million Mormons. So if you only put 2 devils on each non-Mormon, you really can put hundreds on every Mormon, right?
It's
I
no
wonder how
wonder.
that interaction takes place. If you've got spiritual matter that can't be measured or touched in any way, how does the influence happen? I mean, is it ESP? Do they twinkle your brain? I mean, they're not whispering to people. They're not writing letters.
Well, possession, for one
So
thing.
what's
so
that?
they're just like, they take over your body and they'll like make you...
They can.
What's
like
that
rope
curse in
people, or-
Harry Potter where they control you?
Cretaceous or something like that.
What's the curse? Katie, what's the curse in Harry Potter where they
Imperial, yeah.
control you? The Imperial?
Imperio, yeah?
And the Imperius? One of
Yeah.
them.
Imperial.
Okay, all right.
It's important that we get this correct.
Didn't the judges in Harry Potter, like, if you were under control of that curse, that was a defense, right? Like if somebody took control of you and whispered things in your ear, that was a defense of innocence, right? Isn't sure?
You mean you couldn't be held responsible for what you did
Right,
under
because
that?
Like temporary
the smoke eaters or whatever they were called, said that they weren't bad guys because they were under this curse, right? Well, that seems kind of right, doesn't it? Like if there's things that are popping into your consciousness that aren't yours, is it really free will to say?
It's not my fault I had that beer.
Right, well, it's not, right?
It was the spirit.
Yeah.
The bad spirit. Not that spirit, the other one.
All right.
But
Panel.
that's the thing is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
No,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Robin.
I'm not aware of Harry Potter because that's a satanic series. But the comment I do want to make is I remember being young and, about all these minions, like, tag teaming or being in large groups, accosting us, just waiting for us to take a drink of alcohol so they could come and possess our bodies, because this will be their only way of experiencing marvelous bodies. And then and like what fear that is, that you always have to protect yourself from possession. I never realized that that's kind of the Mormon brand of possession. And then the idea that the early leaders of the church would actually, and I've even heard stories of people now that believe they're casting out, demons.
The guy right next to you cast out a demon on his mission.
That's right. That's right. Okay, yeah, so there's one of my modern stories. But anyway, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the idea that Cain, because he had a body, is actually ruling over Satan. So Satan, who's supposed to be the most powerful, isn't necessarily, since, he never had the experience of a body.
Yes.
It seems like a body is sort of a hindrance, though. Like,
You're
till it's
doing it wrong.
resurrected.
right. So the point of being on earth is to practice our agency. It's sort of like a test, Mormons call it. And the body has desires. The natural man is an enemy to God. And so the point is that our spirit form has to master the body in order to move on to the next level. It's like a video game.
So we talked about the demons. We talked a little bit about talents. That it's not only used to describe your position in life, whether you're a Romney-esque and have butlers and that sort of stuff that you have to manage. But it also has to do with the very little things. It is taught commonly in the LDS Church that you are foreordained to every calling and every priesthood office and everything that you would have. So if you become a bishop when you're 45, you were ordained in the pre-existence to become a bishop. And I can imagine waiting in that line. There's this guy and the hands are going on, the hands are going, I'm next. And then you get baptized, and then they say, move on. You would know that you were in for trouble. You weren't going to be in the top callings. But
I've got a reference for that, by the way. This is from the 1997 Gospel Principles Manual. It says, we can learn more about our talents and callings when we receive our patriarchal blessings. It says, see Harold B. Lee, stand ye in holy places. But it references right there, your talents and callings were known ahead of time.
Yeah, and what this does, and this leads to the next thing that I really want to talk about, which I call Mormon exceptionalism. There is this cultural idea that our culture today is not transitory, but it's somehow like, this is the way things are. Like, we scrapbook and toll paint because that's what you do. You shave, you wear a tie, because I've been told several times that the white shirt and Brooks Brothers suit is like the uniform of the priesthood, right? That there's this sort of implication that we're doing things this way because this is the way they're supposed to be done. But American exceptionalism is the idea this is a special place, that we're different than the rest of the world, and that we can therefore treat the world very differently. I mean, this invades all sorts of American political thought. But Mormons have the same view about themselves, somewhat propagated by this doctrine. Because if we were there in the pre-existence, and then we were selected to not only be in the last days, which is very special, but to be of the right race and the right lineage and the right family, and to be born in Utah, and to have the priesthood and to be able to go on a mission. What's the folk doctrine that went around quite a bit during Hinckley's time, when people would go up in heaven and say, I died in the Roman Colosseum, and another person said, I was a starving child in Calcutta, and then you'll say, I lived in the era of President Hinckley, and a hush will fall over the crowd because you were one of the big you had a hard life or something. I don't know what the implication is there.
Yeah, you'll live in the last days.
Yeah.
Sorry, quick question. Maybe taking it back a little bit to the pre-existence and the patriarchal blessings. But my sister, it has Down syndrome, and I remember learning about this growing up and being jealous that she didn't have this challenge, because the mentally disabled are sort of exempt. They're sort of living the free pass back to the celestial kingdom. And I don't know if you're going to get into that, but I've always, being that's right there in my family, I've always wondered, what level of mental disability do you qualify? And, maybe at some levels I do qualify. I don't know. But,
just out of curiosity, does she have a patriarchal blessing?
Yeah, and we heard about, I'd heard the stories from, the folk stories that go around about, you talked about someone sitting in the council, and there's the stories about you were one of the ones that personally escorted some of the 1/3 out of heaven, and I think my mom was maybe looking forward to it. I was actually there for it. I got mine at the same time, and hers was about 3 sentences long. It was pretty much, you've been blessed with a good family. They love you. You have a loving spirit. Amen. And so it didn't really pan out for her to be given too many secrets to premortal, but our patriarch didn't really get into those details.
Sounds like a good patriarch.
Yeah, well, this shows the explanatory power of this doctrine, and this is a very. I mean, I've been fairly lighthearted with this, but it's very useful because there are these elements in life that show up that are completely unfair. I think we really deride the teaching of the church that the black people were fence sitters or whatever in the pre-existence, but there is a sort of a dark-sided positive to that, to try to put meaning to the social injustice that happens in the world today. You can find the same flavor of that teaching in a lot of Eastern religions, in terms of karma and your birth status and the caste that you're born into. Well, because we live in an unjust society, the fact that you're an untouchable in the streets has to be because of something before your birth. So this is not like an idea that Joseph Smith just pulled out of the sky. Or maybe he did, but it's an idea that keeps coming up again and again. And the folk doctrine to which we were just alluding there, which I'm sure you've all heard, is that an individual goes in to get their patriarchal blessing, and they're mentally challenged on some level. They have Down syndrome or something, and what the patriarch tells them is that this individual was part of the honor guard that escorted the hounds of hell out of heaven, the 1/3 host of heaven, and they are particularly upset. So because of that innocent status, and in Mormon theology, those who are below 8 can't be tempted and they can't commit sin. So if you're mentally below the age of 8, and that's literally how the church defines it, if you have the mental capacity of an 8-year-old, you can be baptized. So if you're mentally below 8, then you have that free pass into heaven. So you can't be tempted. So this individual in this folk story in the patriarchal blessing was given that special status of being mentally handicapped to make them impervious to the attacks of the demons.
I would imagine that's quite comforting.
Same would be the case
to think about it that way.
Young children.
If you're a parent, yeah. Like, wow,
And
this
young
difficulty
children.
and this struggle there's some meaning, there's some
Right,
purpose
and
to
they're
all
super
this.
special.
Yeah.
There's a comment, right?
I was just thinking that Satan must have had an awful lot of people escorting him out. I'm guessing almost everybody in this room has heard of somebody whose patriarchal blessings had. You personally escorted Satan out of.
Yeah,
Right,
but
some-
you know how many
There's like
hosts, how
millions
many
of
a
people
third
escorting
of the,
him. Like,
Yeah. Well, it oftentimes does get, at least in the story I've heard, it gets very, you're the one who escorted the Satan out, as opposed to just the 33.3
you were in the
billion
group,
that we
yeah.
established. Go ahead.
So, being raised in the church, you hear a bajillion times how awesome you were in the pre-existence. Especially with the whole "you're the chosen generation" stuff, and a lot of people my age are really sick of that. Honestly, because we hear it all the time. But it's interesting that we're never ever mediocre people in the pre-earth life. I mean, they never say like, what, you were really loving and you were special. They never just say that. They're like, no, you were a general. You were a rock star in heaven. And that always was weird to me, because I'm like, what? I bet I was one of these kind of half-awesome people.
All right. So the next, we're still talking about implications from the doctrine. There's one that I want to bring up because our evangelical friends bring it up all the time, and I think that they're trying to throw sand in people's eyes, and that's the doctrine that Jesus and Satan are brothers. And they will use this to try to poison the well of Mormon, to try to make Mormonism look weirder than it already is. And you know what? I already, there's enough weird stuff that you don't have to invent weird stuff. The problem, the reason I'm sort of against them saying this is it's really twisting the doctrine, because what the doctrine is really that we are all these siblings. Like Jesus and Satan do not have a special brother relationship. There's a lot of religions that have in their mythology twin brothers or something, where one's evil and one's good, and that shows up all the time. And it seems like the evangelicals are trying to put that sort of mythology on Mormonism, and I really don't think that's justified. Because in terms of intelligence, we're also co-equal with God, so they could take it one step back and say the devil and Jesus are brothers with God, and in a sense, in Mormon doctrine, that would be true also.
Well, isn't it the case that for a lot of Christian religions, that they believe that God didn't create the devil, but in Mormonism, God did create the devil.
No, I'm not a Christian theologian, but I think if you allow for the fact that God didn't create the devil, then you're allowing for a non-omnipotent God. So I think in all Christian theology that I know, God always has to create the devil, either inadvertently, the devil is a fallen angel, or specifically, that there would need to be balance.
Go ahead.
I was thinking back on the disability. I came kind of late here. But what about the plasticity of our brain? We can certainly cause ourselves disabilities by our free wills. Does that change our rank in anything in the pre-existence? It was foreordained that we would cause ourselves injury, or we'd come down to injury.
Are you talking about like pre-existent pot smokers, or what?
It could be anybody. Like, you could be hurt at work or something. Does that change your rank? Does that
change your
free
spirit?
pass? Yeah.
And your culpability, as it were.
Yeah, I've heard all sorts of things. I remember when I was a kid, there was I think a boy in our stake who was kind of a hellion, and then he wrecked his motorbike when he was like 16 or 17. But after that, he was sort of in a wheelchair and went to church, and he was pretty well a vegetable, if I remember correctly. And I think that caused the theological conundrum you're talking about. Was he forever stuck with his sins from beforehand, or was he did? I actually, if I remember right, I'm pulling this from the recess of my brain. There was a good-meaning sister who talked about that God caused the accident to happen to stop him in his devilish ways.
That's why I can't be a dualist anymore, a spirit realm, physical realm thinker, just because in order for that to work out, you basically have a spirit that has all your real intent and your genuine morality or whatever. But if the meat gets scrambled, it's like the antenna isn't working anymore, and you might choose dangerous things or harmful things, and you wouldn't really be accountable for it. Whereas if you're just a monist, where all there is the meat, when it gets scrambled, people's behaviors and tendencies just morph, because that's all there is.
Your personality is your body. I mean, it's from your brain.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Instead of some other substance, spirit.
Living somewhere inside you. Because all you have is an injured brain results in a modified personality.
Well, and this sort of runs into the bigger problem here with this doctrine, which is according to the Pearl Great Prize, Abraham was one of the elect and one of the learned ones in the pre-existence, and that's why he became Abraham. So it's sort of like we all went to school. We all went to middle school, and there were some people who were really great students, some people were really mediocre students. And then we're about to go into high school, and they give everybody a pill that erases everything they ever learned. But they don't teach them anything else. They just give them a test. Yeah, it gets very weird. Or let me give you a better analogy. You start school when you're 5. You don't know anything. And in this school, there's only one teacher who's teaching truth, and it's like the basket weaving teacher. Everybody else is teaching wrong stuff, right? Not only it's not just they're lying to you. The teachers are standing up there and they're lying to you. They're saying, I'm teaching you calculus, but really there isn't even any such thing as calculus. And you don't need to even know calculus. But people are graduating, getting jobs as engineers, da-da-da-da-da. But it's this one basket weaving class that is really everything and the only thing that matters. But nobody in the school, except the basket weaving teacher, knows this secret. So the basket weaving teacher is walking around saying, you don't need to know calculus, you just need to know basket weaving. But the basket weaving teacher itself, he can't make very good baskets. They're always leaky and they fall apart, and they say, well, that's just because I'm not a perfect basket weaver. I was acting as a man when I made that basket. And then at the end, when you graduate, you get handed this test, and it's all about basket weaving. I mean, everybody's got to be like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Even if this is the way it's supposed to go, who wants anything to do with that? And that's to me one of the conundrums of this whole thing. If it's and frankly, not to be flip, that's what finally flipped it for me and made it comfortable for me to leave the church, because I said, this thing is so screwed up that even if it's true, I don't want anything to do with it. Because it's just, you can't win. Most people I was going to write a short story one time. You go to heaven and they say, there was one true religion and it was on, Madagascar from 3000 BC to 2000 BC. Now don't worry, it's going to be restored in about 1,000 years, and then they'll do this ceremony that'll get you all in. You'd be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want anything to do with that. That's my problem with pre-existence. All right.
I like that was a rich analogy. Thank you.
It's not good unless I mix about 7 metaphors in together at the same time. Okay, let's talk about some of the... Did you have something else to say?
I did have one thing I wanted to add. We were back on Jesus and Satan being brothers, and the evangelicals wanting to put that forward. The church has actually been running away from that a little bit. Again, I've got equivalent paragraphs from Gospel Principles, chapter 2 from 1997, and then the phrasing of the same passage in 2009. 1997 reads, "Every person who was ever born was our spirit brother or sister in heaven. The first spirit born to our heavenly parents was Jesus Christ, so he is literally our elder brother." The equivalent in 2009 says, "Every person who was ever born on earth is our spirit brother or sister." They completely removed the idea of Jesus Christ being a brother. They removed the idea of heavenly parents and just left it much simple, much
Do you
cleaner.
have the Heavenly Mother change?
It's oh yeah, where's that?
Oh, yeah, because there is the concept when we say heavenly parents that there's not just a God, but there's a couple or a man with many wives, maybe. But there are women gods, and they were the ones who bore the children. I guess we did mention the gestational.
All right, so here it is, Gospel Principles, again, from 1997. It doesn't say the word mother, but you'll hear parents in plurality. So, "Our heavenly parents provided us with a celestial home more glorious and beautiful than any place on earth. We were happy there, yet they knew we could not progress beyond a certain point unless we left them for a time." The current reading now is, "Our Heavenly Father knew we could not progress beyond a certain point unless we left Him for a time."
Poof, she's gone. 10 years, 1997 to 2009. Yes, go ahead.
I really like to hear anything the church ever has about Heavenly Mother, because when I was a kid, I thought that was the most awesome doctrine ever. But they never talked about it, and so I think that the church is really dropping the ball on that one. That could be a really cool doctrine. But anyway, you were talking about your high school analogy. And it made me think about the first lessons we received in the pre-earth life. And these first lessons were received kind of before the Grand Council, before the war. And what's the point? Because for however 100,000 millennia, we learned about the entire plan of salvation, right? So we made our choices and stuff. And we also learned about what this life is all about. We learned a lot of things. And then we forget it. We forget it all. There's a veil. So that always kind of confused me a little bit.
The point is to see if somehow our spirit, without knowing all that stuff, can still tune in to the light of Christ and master this physical form. We didn't have a physical form before to try out, so I guess that's the point.
It was like when you learn geology in 7th grade, and you're not really going to use it in your life for the next few years, right? You got all of high school where you don't really use geology, but maybe you'll be a geologist later after you graduate. So in your pre-earth life, you learn something. Well, you're not going to use it for the next little bit, but after you die, it might come in handy.
Somewhat, LDS person once explained to me it was like the born identity. You're a trained assassin, you just don't know you are until you pick up the gun or the penknife or something. Maybe it's something like that. All right.
Do you have "Oh My Father"?
Yeah, so that brings us to, we have clips.
Sort of.
If I can get it to work.
Uh-oh.
I can get it to work.
Can you hear it? Can they hear it? one has Heavenly Mother.
Oh, I didn't get to Heavenly Mother?
In the heavens, are parents single? No.
All eyes are